Gratitude for me is truly appreciating how amazing life is. And I think it's so important to wring every day dry because you don't know when your last day will be. Sadly, 8 years ago, my younger brother just suddenly dropped dead. Not expected. He wasn't ill. He was practicing for the London to Brighton cycle race. And one of the gifts that came out of that very dark time was to remember that life is absolutely precious. And for me, gratitude is about, I equate that to life, really. If you're grateful for who you are and grateful for what you have and grateful for your life, then you're going to get more out of life.
Welcome to the Gratitude Podcast on www.georgianbenta.com, where you'll hear a new story each week that will inspire more gratitude in your own life. Our mission is to inspire 100,000 people to discover how to feel gratitude and live a happy life through the amazing life stories of our successful guests and their actionable tips. And now, the host of our podcast, Georgian Benta.
Hi, Gratitude Seeker. Welcome to a new episode of the Gratitude Podcast. Today with us is an amazing person and a really inspiring person. Her name is Gina Gardiner. She is a #1 best-selling author, a motivational speaker, an empowerment coach, transformational leadership training, NLP master practitioner and coach, with well over 30 years of experience helping people achieve happiness and success. Her story is just incredible. She told me a bit about her story before we got live, but I will let Gina tell you more about her story and the amazing things that she's able to do in spite of some challenges that she had in her life. Gina?
Thank you very much for inviting me onto your podcast show. I really do appreciate it. And what an amazing theme that you have, which is gratitude, which I think is so powerful.
Thank you.
I suppose the best place to start my story is in 1982, probably before lots of your listeners were actually born. I became the deputy head of a large school, a principal of a large school. Very excited to do that. And I was appointed to be the catalyst for change. In fact, the head teacher told me not to apply because he wanted to appoint a man. But I still applied and I got the job. And I loved it. I was the youngest bar 2 on the staff. Hard to believe that now, isn't it?
Wow.
And we set up a whole program to bring the school forward into modern ways. And so when it got to, because in England the school year starts in September. I don't know if it's the same where you are.
Yeah.
And by the February, I was really pleased to be going skiing. At that time, I was a really keen skier, and we went off to St Anton. And I had a pretty bad ski accident. I fell about 200 feet down a mountain.
Wow.
I wasn't skiing at the time. I was sitting on a mogul. I don't know, though, if you know what a mogul is. It's where, where the weather carves out the snow, and moguls can be 2 inches deep and they can be much bigger. And these were about 6 foot. So great big mounds of snow that you had to ski round or across and down. So we were having a rest. Everybody was sitting on their own personal mogul, rather like an elf sitting on a mushroom. And it was a very, very hot day. And the top of mine melted and gave way. And I fell. And because it was so steep, there was nowhere to land. So I just kept on bouncing. Fortunately, knocked myself out. So I think that's what saved me. And yeah, I was pretty bashed up. But I was off school for about a month. But by the time I got back, was pleased to be back. And then I was due to be a deputy leader with the children. We were taking 156 children skiing to St Anton, about 50 from my school. And as the week went on, I became more and more unwell. And by the Friday, as we finished with the skiing with children, I said to my colleagues, I've got to go and lie down. And I suddenly found myself to be paralysed down my left-hand side, which was really challenging. Didn't want to frighten the children, so I had to wait for somebody to come in. So if you fast forward then to, I got back to school in May, and by the summer holidays, which come in towards the end of July, I was really pleased to have the summer holiday. On the 8th of August, I got a phone call to say that John Hughes, the head of the school, lovely man, had suddenly died in his sleep. And I was then the acting head for a term. And then in January 1984, I was appointed to be the head teacher. And I was absolutely determined that I wanted to make the school as successful as I could. And I was the head there for 20 years.
Wow.
For the first few years, I managed to walk around the site. It was a very spread site. Most of the classrooms were not in the main building. They were cross playground. We had 2 big fields. But by 1989, I had tried an experimental drug therapy that failed, and I had to use a wheelchair in school to get around. 1996, I sneezed and I ruptured a disc. And when I'd had the operation, I was left with a failed back surgery syndrome, which meant that I couldn't put my left foot to the floor without fainting. They called it failed back surgery syndrome. And it took me pretty well 2 years to walk to the bottom of my not very big garden.
Mm-hmm.
The last day of the summer term had finished. I wasn't feeling very well and I was sick, and I ruptured another disc. And when I came out of that operation, again, I had failed back surgery syndrome, but this time I was completely wheelchair bound. I came out of hospital on the last Friday of August, and by the first Friday in September, I was back at school. Now, the situation was that if I was at home, if somebody didn't leave me out a cup or a plate, I couldn't make myself a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. As I was saying to you earlier, on one particular day, nobody had left anything out, and I was desperate for a drink. The only thing that I could find that was going to work was I used a saucepan. It's the only thing I could actually reach. But in school, I could use my brain, my eyes, my hands, my mouth, and I could operate absolutely effectively, doing something I really loved and I felt had huge purpose. So a no-brainer. For me, I wanted to be useful. I wanted to be doing something well. And my dad was always the one that said, if you're not feeling great, go and do something useful, go and think about other people. And that's something that's held me in really good stead. So by the time I got back to school, in a wheelchair, unable to actually stand at that point. And until I left in 2002, that was the situation, that I couldn't actually walk. I was wheelchair bound. Now, I don't want your listeners to think that, I'm going to dismiss it and say it was easy. It wasn't. There were some pretty dark days along the way.
I totally believe that.
2 things, I think, made the difference. One is I was determined that school would succeed, and I had to find a way of enabling my teachers to give the children in the school the best possible deal. And that's been one of the huge gifts that's come out of my disability, is that I had to create a way where people would take responsibility for their own performance. And the school actually was incredibly successful because of the team.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We were on the 100 best schools in England twice while I was a head teacher. And so I'm very, very proud of all of my staff and the children and parents for achieving that. I'd like to think that if I hadn't had that disability, I would have hit across a way of finding a way to empower people in the way that I did. I suspect that I'd have been too controlling, that I would have wanted to interfere in a way that I couldn't, because I couldn't physically get into the classrooms. I could sit at the doorway, but even if I could get the wheelchair through the door, I couldn't get round the classrooms. There simply wasn't enough room. So I really had to find a way of empowering other people. And the gift has not only been for people in school. My school became a beacon school based on developing leadership. So I went and helped hundreds of other schools. Since I left headship in 2004, I've worked with countless organisations and people using those principles, using those strategies, and they work. And they've worked not only for me and my school, but for all of these other places. They've become far more successful as individuals or as teams or as organisations using those same techniques and those same strategies. I think the other big thing that helped me was focusing on what I could do and not what I couldn't. And that's still true now. Although I can now walk short distances, I still can't manage without my wheelchair if I go out into town or I go on holiday, or I'm going anywhere that requires probably more than 100 yards, and that's pushing it a bit for me, really. Then I have to use the wheelchair. So focusing on what you can do, of course, you can do far more than you can't. And if you focus on what you can't do, that's very depressing. It becomes debilitating and your world gets smaller and smaller. If you focus on what you can do, then the world's amazing. And just before I finish this, and I've gone on rather, I would say disability is a metaphor for life. So my legs don't work very well. But if I get into my electric wheelchair, and I have to tell you it's very fast, I can go at speed. But most people, myself included, have limiting beliefs about themselves that you take with you. I'm not good enough. I'm not tall enough. I'm not rich enough. I haven't enough time. I can't do this because. Those are dissing your ability. They are a disability that you carry with you. And most people don't challenge them because most of our thinking is habitual. So you don't actually challenge that thinking. And so those limitations stay with you forever. And that means your world is contracted rather than expanded.
Totally. And I think this is really, really inspiring. And firstly, the fact that you were and you are in a position in which you need to empower others, and you actually cannot do everything yourself. And I think this is really wonderful that you've seen things in this way and that you managed to do that. I think this is really great.
Thank you. I have to say the alternative was so much worse. This was the easy bit, rather than staying at home and focusing on what I couldn't do. That for me would be just awful.
Yeah, I can only imagine. But I think it's also even more powerful for your school and for the kids and the parents, seeing you doing this work and focusing on your strengths and on what you were able to do. I think it inspired them as well to look at their strengths and at what they can do, and to actually do that and see that they can do much more than they thought.
I was really worried, and I delayed using a wheelchair for quite a long time because I was worried, what would the children think? Children didn't bat an eyelid, I have to say. A couple of very little children asked me, why are you in the chair? And I simply said, my legs don't work very well. And they were nodded and went off quite happily with that. As far as I know, the parents didn't mind. So long as the school was running well, they didn't mind. But I hope that I challenged some preconceived ideas, because the general public, particularly before the 2012 Paralympics, I think there was a sea change in the UK then, assumed because you were in a wheelchair that you didn't have a brain. So my secretary at the time used to laugh because she'd push me into town, because at that time I didn't have an electric wheelchair, and people would use that voice, would you like a sweetie? As if
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, I think it's the movies, because usually in the movies when someone's in a wheelchair, they are pictured like they can't do anything. Yeah, and that's not very good. But I I wanted to point something out in what you said, the fact that we can disabilitate ourselves, and the way out of that is by actually appreciating our strengths and seeing them and using them and focusing on them. So how do you do that actually?
I think in the first instance, let's say you were one of my clients and you had a very poor self-image, a poor sense of self-worth. The first thing is to actually look at the things you can do. Let's make a list of all of those things that you can do and look at the evidence. Because when you start to write it down and you look at all of the evidence which is there, then very often that starts to recalibrate the way in which you think. I also do an exercise with people where I have some little posters which say on them, I am enough. You can do this by just putting a piece of paper with I am enough, but put it around the house on your shade on your car. So every time you put your shade on the car, you see it. Welly you're going to see it regularly, the words, I am enough. And every time you see them, you say with a real bit of welly, I am enough. I am enough. I am enough. And I've done this with so many people now. And within a month, if you do that regularly, several times a day, you can recalibrate your brain to start thinking you are enough. Because when you're genuinely being you, you're the most amazing person. At our most basic level, we don't have to think to breathe or say cells reproduce or nails grow. We just do it. And you think of how complex our thinking is and the whole range of things that we can do. We are amazing when we allow ourselves to be. So I think Look for the evidence. The evidence will tell you that you are an amazing human being. And even if you don't believe it to start with, the old saying, fake it till you make it, works. Try it for a month, but you have to do it consistently several times a day for a month. The results are absolutely amazing.
I love it. I love it. I think this is such a great way. So gratitude seekers, make sure you do this, because it's very easy to do. It's not like a lot of work, but I think I will try it out as well, and I think the outcome is just amazing. I wanted to add something interesting. Usually, people, even the ones that you admire very much, they don't say so. You would like to be like them, most probably, but they don't say that you should be like them, but you should be like you, the best version of yourself. And this is what I think this can help you a lot with. So being enough brings out the best in you and the uniqueness that you have.
Absolutely. Can I just add one thing? One of the other things that I would, for every client, not whatever they come from, is I teach them gratitudes. Your brain is rather like an old-fashioned vinyl record. You get stuck in the groove of not noticing things, of being negative. And if you want to retrain your brain, I teach people a very, very simple exercise, and you may very well do this yourself and teach people this. Go through the day looking for gratitudes that you can collect and make them easy. It could be just noticing the pattern of the rain on the window, or a rainbow, or the dog has made you laugh, or somebody's given you a hug, or you've had a phone call from an old friend. And then just before you go to sleep, scan the day, and hopefully you'll have lots and lots of things, a nice meal, a good cup of tea, whatever. And then out of all of those things that you've collected and noticed, choose 5, and they be your 5 best gratitudes for that day. And again, if you do that on a regular basis, you'll start noticing the great things in life and being grateful for them, and not all of the horrible things that happen. and you get more what you focus on.
I want to tell you about the podcast I recently discovered that I know you're gonna love. If you're like me, you might have thought about learning a language, but maybe you found it too daunting or too boring. Well, if you want to learn Spanish and connect with the 572 million people who speak Spanish around the world, you should definitely check out the Learn Spanish con Salsa podcast. Every week, host Tamara Marie brings you one step closer to fluency by making language learning fun and effortless. Learn Spanish con Salsa immerses you in the Latino culture and teaches Spanish through music and conversation. Delete all those boring, robotic language learning apps and listen to authentic Spanish you can use in conversations with real people. Subscribe to the Learn Spanish con Salsa podcast now and hear a new episode every Tuesday. Just search for Learn Spanish con Salsa wherever you're listening to this podcast. Totally. I love this. I think it's really great. I've done this for a while and it really works. And it's really great for the sleep. When you sleep, thinking about all the wonderful things that happened, you're just in another state. And it's somehow when I think about this exercise, I think about when you were in love, like when you went to sleep, the only thing you could think about was that person you were in love with, and that person can be your life and the experiences that you had that day. I think it's somehow in the same area.
Yeah. The most important relationship any of us have is with ourselves. And if you don't actually love and appreciate you, then appreciating and loving other people becomes more of a challenge, because every relationship is the relationship that you have with you, isn't it?
Oh, totally. Sometimes we don't actually see others because we perceive them in such a way that we can't actually know how they are, because we are so much in our story and how we think about them and things like
Absolutely.
this.
Yeah.
So that's why it's totally very important. So what I also wanted to ask you on this, what does gratitude mean for you?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Gratitude for me it's lots of things. It's truly appreciating how amazing life is. And I think it's so important to wring every day dry, because you don't know when your last day will be. Sadly, 8 years ago, my younger brother just suddenly dropped dead. Not expected. He wasn't ill. He was practicing for the London to Brighton cycle race. And one of the gifts that came out of that very dark time was to remember that life is absolutely precious. And for me, gratitude is about, I equate that to life, really. If you're grateful for who you are and grateful for what you have and grateful for your life, then you're going to get more out of life. That doesn't mean being complacent, because I think we can always make things even better. It's not, I'm grateful for what I've got and there's nothing else. That's not for me what gratitude is. It's appreciating life in its small bits. It's not about the big stuff, although that's lovely. It's about the little things day by day that actually go to make our lives wonderful. And the chances are, if people are listening to this, they're in the top few % of the world who have good plumbing and electricity and technology and enough food to eat. And there are so many people who don't have that. We're very, very fortunate, I think.
Yes, we are. I have another part of the Gratitude podcast is the gratitude reminders. And each day, 5 days a week, I have another idea for which we can be grateful. And like you said, the plumbing and being able to take a shower or a bath, these are such simple things, but we take them so much for granted.
It's not until you have a problem with your plumbing and suddenly
Exactly.
The shower doesn't work or the toilet's bunged up, then you appreciate it, don't you? But not normally. No.
Yeah, I actually had that situation a month or two ago, and I was telling the gratitude seekers to appreciate the fact that they do have a shower, and it's so I actually had to go to a friend to take a shower or to wash the clothes, and it was quite an experience to not be able to have that simple experience that we take for granted so much.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, not till you haven't got it.
Yeah, exactly. So do you have like a quote that you really like on gratitude?
It's by Stephen Richards. Gratitude opens your eyes to the limitless potential of the universe, while dissatisfaction closes your eyes to it.
Wow. I love it. I also wanted to add something on this topic. The media in general makes us think that we need all kinds of things, and businesses that are not very ethical usually makes us think that we need all kinds of things in order for us to be happy and to enjoy life, when it's actually the other way around, because we can have those things. At least in my experience, I have had that experience that I had some things that I really wanted, and I was still unsatisfied. And it was so weird for me because the influence from the exterior told me that if I got that, I should be happy and it should be all perfect. And when it wasn't like that, I was like, what's wrong? And I think gratitude was the missing ingredient.
It's interesting because if you look at many people who have been incredibly successful financially, as they go through life, many of them start to realize that actually it's empty. And they start to recognize that if you want a life that's truly full of purpose and fulfillment, it's about appreciating who you are and helping other people.
Totally.
And for me, happiness is a choice. And one of the little techniques that I teach people is the funky chicken technique.
It sounds cool.
So you wake up in the morning, because for me, everything we do, whatever it is a choice. Even not choosing is a choice. And every choice has consequences. And not choosing and letting things drift usually has worse consequences than actually making a choice. Yeah. So it's your choice to be happy or not. So that's the background of it. So as you wake up in the morning, you lie in bed, and while you're still lying in bed, before you get up and clean your teeth and do whatever, you do the funky chicken. You know that thing with your arms, the funky chicken?
Yeah.
And you ask yourself the following question. It's a new day. Can I feel the sides of my coffin? No, I can't. So I choose to be happy. Now, the interesting thing is it's a silly thing to do, but what it does is exactly as it did with you, is it makes people just smile. Now, what better way to start a day on a smile rather than getting up and thinking, oh, I've got to go and do this and I've got to go and do that, and oh, I've got all of these worries. So it's just a little thing. And some clients have decided they don't want to be a chicken, they want to be a penguin, or they want to be their favourite bird. I don't care. You don't even have to be a bird. Just see if your coffin's there, and if it's not, choose to be happy. Choose to be grateful and happy. What a waste of your life not to be. Don't you think?
Totally. But sometimes life gets hard, and we find it so much harder to be grateful. What do you do then?
I think if you make it your habit that it's something that you do, then it's easier. And for me, on days, and I still struggle on some days with pain and fatigue, for me is always an issue. On those days now, because it has become my habit, instead of focusing in on the fact that I feel like rubbish, I focus out on looking for those things. It's become an ingrained habit. So I think I don't want to make light of people's problems, because I know just how challenging they can be. But even if you start with something very little, that can help, and it can build. Each time you build something little onto that something little onto that something little, it becomes more significant. But the more it is part of your habitual way of being, the easier it will be. And that doesn't mean some days that we're fed up. There are days when I'm fed up. They don't come often now, and they don't last long. And gratitude for me is probably the single most powerful way of getting out of that. And go and do something useful.
This is wonderful. And that's why this podcast actually exists, to help people to make gratitude something that they do consistently. Because in my life as well, I've seen how much it helps when things go wrong, and like it was the situation. Our listeners don't know, but I actually was late for our meeting because I had to go and take care of some paper work, and it was really interesting for me to. So it was kind of a frustrating situation, and usually people would get really mad because I had to run and do the same thing twice practically, and I was fortunate enough for Gina to be very understanding. That's one thing that I was really grateful about. And the other one was the fact that I was able to move around fast, and that I'm young, and then that I can do that, and also that I could keep in touch with Gina and tell her what's the situation, and with friends while I was waiting for quite a while there. And yeah, things do happen, and this is something that, at least in my life experiences, it has been like this. Even if I'm grateful and I'm happy a lot of the time, things do happen. We still have challenges, and having this gratitude practice and this gratitude foundation makes it so much easier to deal with everything.
I believe you're absolutely right. Yeah. And for those of people that haven't made it part of their daily practice, I really say to you, give it a go, because it does work. And I've now used it with hundreds of people, and it works. It truly does.
That's wonderful. Thank you. So I'm really curious about how you got to discover gratitude in your life. Like, not the concept like gratitude. People know about gratitude, that it exists, but actually live it and actually experience it.
That's an interesting question, and I'm not sure I actually know the real answer. I was brought up with parents who were grateful, and who taught us as children to be grateful for the things that we had. We didn't have a lot of money growing up. My dad, particularly a teacher, and somebody who incredibly optimistic and always looked on the good side of things, and my mum too, but and both of them had very difficult childhoods, but were grateful for family and grateful for the opportunity. And even though we didn't have a lot of material things, we were grateful for the fact that we had one another and that we were a close-knit family. So I suspect it started then, and I think that if you're exposed to people who demonstrate gratitude, then that starts to become part of your DNA, really, doesn't it? But I do believe it's never too late. So if you weren't brought up like that, you can just start now and it will work.
And even more so if you're a parent and you have children, it's the best way to educate them, because they will see how grateful you are, and they will copy the gratitude that they see.
One thing I would say to parents, though, the parents who say, eat your dinner, be grateful you've got your dinner, because otherwise there's lots of starving children in Africa. I have a feeling that doesn't help children feel grateful. Rather than use it in that way, when they've had a lovely day. Lots of my clients have started to use the gathering gratitudes, and as the children go to bed, after their story, before they go to sleep, each of them share their 5 best gratitudes. So they're teaching their children right from tiny to notice and to recognize. And for me, that's a much more upbeat, powerful way, rather than it being used as a stick, really.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I think that instead of them becoming grateful, they become I can't get the word exactly. They feel ashamed. Pardon?
Yeah. resentful, I suppose.
Yeah, resentful, or they feel ashamed if they're not grateful, and it gets to be a weird combination between actual gratitude and the beautiful feeling that you actually feel that comes from the inside, and the shame that you're not doing that, and that's not very healthy.
No, but I think by helping them recognize, and it doesn't have to be the big things, and the sharedness of it, doing it with them and the parents coming up with their 5 gratitudes too. I think there's something very powerful about that shared experience.
Yeah, exactly. I actually, today I had another interview with a university professor from Australia. Right. And in her book, she tells a story about a professor that had some challenges with the children. There were some bullying situations, and the way he dealt with it was with gratitude. So he went and told every student what he is grateful for about that particular child.
That's a nice way to do it, isn't it?
Yeah, and the wonderful thing is, at the end, after he did it with every single child, they all, so spontaneously, they all did it with him. So every child told the teacher what they appreciated about him.
How lovely. And interestingly, bullies are usually, in my experience, very unhappy, have very poor sense of self-worth. So what they did was going to build that child up rather than knock it down further. So that's fabulous.
Exactly. So even though there was this situation in which the kind of behavior wasn't okay, by building the character up, by building the beautiful parts, like you said, like the strengths, what was great in that person, it came out, and it's such a great example.
Fabulous. I think, a really great way of doing it.
Yeah, and this works, in my opinion, this works as well in parent-child relationship really well.
It's very easy for parents to get into nag mode and to look at the things that children are doing wrong. And children will have attention on any terms. So, for parents out there, if you want your child to behave, and parents would often say to me when I was the head, how is it they behave for you, but they don't behave for me? Part of that is that we were very clear about the boundaries. No means no. So parents only use the word no if you really, really mean it, rather than no, oh, all right then, because that's kiss of death. But ultimately, looking at what children can do and helping them recognize their strengths builds their self-confidence. And then they're much more likely to try the things that they find difficult.
Exactly. So we're nearing the end of our discussion today. And I wanted to ask you, who are you grateful for in your life? If you want to mention a few people.
I'm grateful for my family. I'm very close to my sister, my brother-in-law, and my aunt Jill. So Paulette and David and Jill. I've got a huge group of friends, and I'm very grateful to them all. They're too many to mention. I've got 7 godchildren. I'm grateful for my clients. I really love the privilege of working with them. And I'm just grateful, actually, to be surrounded by people that are genuinely lovely to be with. I'm truly blessed. I don't have any clients that I don't actually really enjoy working with. The people who help me, I've got Sarah and Anna, and come and help me in the office. I've got Ben, who's 19 with blue hair and bother boots, who comes and helps me with technology. John North in Australia, who helps me with my marketing. I'm just grateful for them all. I'm grateful for the privilege, really, of being in a situation where I can sit and talk to you, and we are in 2 very different countries, and we can talk as two equals through a piece of plastic and a bit of electronics. How awesome is that?
I know. It's just amazing, and it works perfectly. That's...
It's easy to tell you the things I am not grateful for, and they're not very many. Slugs and snails, because they're greedy and they don't leave my plants alone. Mosquitoes, because they love me and they see me as Meals on Wheels. And technology when it doesn't go wrong. Apart from that, life is pretty good.
That's awesome. Thank you. So where can our audience find you? Where can we see your work?
The website is the https :// it's genuinely-you.com, and you can find lots and lots of free stuff on the website. There's also a 7-part free video series which I'd like to offer to all of your listeners, and that's called 7 Principles for Living a Happy and Successful Life. There are lots of podcasts. You can go onto iTunes and find me. I'm on Facebook. Please come and follow me on Facebook and join the Genuinely You group. It's genuinely.gina50 for Facebook. I'm on Twitter, Instagram and LinkedIn. Use my name for all of those. So I'd love to see people there, and I'd particularly love it if they told me that they'd arrived through your podcast, because that would be lovely to be able to track those. Also, if they want to hear more of my story and more of the strategies that I use, then the book Chariots on Fire is available through the website or through Amazon. Now, the Chariots on Fire is an allusion to my wheelchair, because people think of it as something of lack. For me, as I told you, my chariot goes faster than it should really. It's my chariot on fire. It's what allows me to do the things I can't do. So I'm very grateful for that. But I'd love to have contact with your listeners. But please let me know that you come through our podcast today, because that would be lovely. And I can then let you know that people have come.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Thank you. So gratitude seekers, make sure you tell her that you're a gratitude seeker, and that I hope that you enjoyed this episode. So thank you very much, Gina. It has been really amazing talking with you.
It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Thank you. And thank you very much to all of the listeners who have listened live and later on. But thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to our weekly podcast. Help us reach our goal of inspiring 100,000 people by sharing this podcast with your loved ones, with your Facebook friends. And if you loved this episode, please write a review on iTunes.